Hey guys, so today I want to show you how I do my DIY screen printing. What you will need is an embroidery hoop. We'll use this to hold the screen in place. You will need silk screening mesh. You can purchase this on Amazon, or if you have an artist and craftsman local, you can also purchase it in their store. If you have another local art store, they may also carry it. But I do suggest that you use the actual silk screening mesh as it works a lot better than any other material that people can suggest. You will also need Mod Podge, a paintbrush, and paint. I'm using acrylic paint for this process. I'm actually printing on paper. It's the first time I've used acrylic paint. You will also need something to use to spread the ink. I got this great squeegee from Home Depot. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the mesh inside the embroidery hoop, and then we're going to lock it into place. You want to make sure when you're doing this that the mesh is very tight inside the frame. That's why you leave the excess around it. So when you cut your mesh, make sure that you don't cut it exactly to size. So you have that extra material to kind of pull on as you're tightening up the screen. Now that the frame is tightened up completely, I'm just going around and checking and pulling on all the excess fabric just to make sure, again, that it's sitting nice and tight inside the frame and that it's not just sagging in any place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut off that excess fabric. Once you have it in place, you don't really need it. And if you were to ever take this screen out of this frame, which you can do that, you can reuse the frames and you can also reuse the screens anytime you want. The way that I paint them with a Mod Podge, it doesn't matter if I have that excess there or not. As long as I have enough to pull it into place, it's fine. After you've painted it in, you don't have to worry about it actually being super tight. Now, I have access to a vinyl cutter, so I've cut my design out, and I'm actually going to use this instead of tracing a design onto the screen. So what I'm going to do is pull the backing off of this. I'm going to apply it. I am going to burnish it down to make sure it has a good adhesion to the screen. Because basically this vinyl is going to act as a mask to block the Mod Podge when I go to paint the screen in. So you just make sure that it's on there good before you take off the transfer tape. And in this situation, this transfer tape is very tacky. So I've had to do a lot of extra just to get it to stay in place. So as I'm peeling transfer tape off, I'm having to go through and actually kind of burnish the vinyl down and make sure that it's tight against the screen and that it's holding in place so that the edges aren't loose where you could have a problem with the Mod Podge actually seeping through. And like I said, unfortunately, this transfer tape was very tacky, so this took a little extra time than what I expected. So I just went through with my nail and I kept on rubbing the vinyl and pushing it down to make sure that it was holding and slowly peeling back the transfer tape. I had a lot of little pieces on this design and I didn't want anything to pull up with a transfer tape and then have to try to reposition it after the fact. So here I'm just being careful. I want to make sure that I get the dot for the eye and that I don't lose that because again, positioning something like that, it's not difficult if it ends up stuck on the transfer tape. It's just a little annoying because you want to get it in the right place. Okay, so now we have the design. It's on the screen. And what we're going to do now is just take the Mod Podge and paint the screen. And what this is going to do is it's going to block off all of the areas that you don't want the ink to come through. So basically, In this case, since we use the vinyl and the vinyl is covering all of the areas we actually want ink, instead of having to be careful and painting inside lines, you can just paint over the entire screen. It works really great. It's a lot faster. Um, it's not as meticulous. If you have a design that has more fine lines, I don't know that you would even want to do the DIY version. You might want to actually use the chemicals and do an emulsion. But in this case, this gives me nice sharp lines, and it's a quick and easy way to do it. Now, also, I've used a lot of Mod Podge. You don't have to use as much as I did. I just try to do it all in one pass. Okay, so the Mod Podge is dry now, and we want to check and make sure there are no pinholes, because anywhere there's a pinhole, ink could come through. So you just want to hold it up to the light, look, and double check and make sure there aren't any pinhole issues. Once you're sure that there are no pinholes, you're actually going to go through and you're just going to peel off the vinyl. It helps to have nails doing this because you've painted over them, so you have to kind of lift them off a little bit because they have that Mod Podge skin over top of them as well. And you'll just go through and you'll peel all of the vinyl off. And I noticed here that Mod Podge did bleed through. Like I said, if your edges are not adhered down perfectly, they're loose, there's a possibility that the Mod Podge will seep through. Just like when you're painting a stencil, if your edges aren't tight, some of that paint can escape and kind of soften your lines. So we're just going to pick off this last little piece. And as you can see, it's a little difficult to see, but the edges are really sharp in this design. And it, like I said, it's a lot different than if you're trying to just hand paint an edge. Typically, you can't get things quite that sharp unless you're really good at painting. If you're really good at painting, hand paint it by all means. But I'm very particular about having sharp edges. So this was the best solution for me. Now we're going to do a test print. I have this cheap sketchbook that I bought at Michael's for like $2. You don't have to use a sketchbook. You can use some scrap paper. You can use cardboard, anything you want to, but you always want to do a test print. Test printing is going to double check to make sure that your screen is perfect and ready to go before you start using it on whatever product you're going to use it on. You don't want to do your test print on a t-shirt because it's a possibility that you're going to ruin that t-shirt. So we're just going to grab the acrylic paint. And again, this is my first time using acrylics. Typically, I do fabric printing, so this will be a new process for me. It's basically the same, but I've just never tested acrylic inks to see how well they work. So you're just going to put some ink at the top or on the side, whatever works best. I use the top here because the image is really narrow. And I also have a small squeegee. So this way the squeegee will cover the entire print as it pulls down. That way I don't have to do more than one pull. So you're just going to take your squeegee and you're going to put it into the paint and you're going to press down on the screen. You want to make sure you have pressure on the screen so it stays in place. And then you're also going to press down on the squeegee as you pull the ink down over the design. Okay, so now you're just going to ease it up off of the paper. And we have the test print done. I see one area here where there's been a little bleeding and, the O isn't perfect. I don't particularly mind the issues up on the eye that I was worried about, but the O might be an issue. So I may have to remake the screen. It kind of, that is more of an issue for me visually than the eye is. And eventually I want to do them on these cards. They're just a simple paper. They have a little texture to them. And actually what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do a test print on one of these just so that you can see the end result that I'm going for. And these are just inexpensive cards that I got at Michael's. They're just simple blank cards, but I wanted thank you cards to send out to my Etsy customers. And I bought these and I was like, okay, well, now we need to make them a little more interesting. So I decided to put my logo on them. And that's what this screen is. So we're just going to lay down the screen on the card. and you want to try to get it aligned. You can use tape as kind of a marker of your edge if you want, or you could draw a line on it. It's not going to hurt anything to draw a line if you want to try to make some like registration marks or something of that nature. For me, since it's a small design, I'm not too stressed about it. So here I just kind of ran out of ink, and you don't want to have too much extra ink on your screen at any time because you don't want to lose it in the end. And once you get done, you want to clean your screen. So you want to make sure you have, you know, as little ink left over on the screen when you're done as possible. And here is the finished product. And I think it adds a lot to this card. And it was a quick and easy thing to do.